Welcome to this Business Central launch event session on what's new in server and database. So this is the third video that we have, and in the agenda of this is about web services. In this particular release wave, we didn't make it faster, we didn't make new features, but we did actually make it a lot more stable, and we hope that that will make the life better for customers and for you.
Yes, and the first thing that we want to talk about is probably also one of the ones that you'll see the most, which is an improvement to our edit in Excel story when you publish your data. Now OData v4 pages evaluate the editable property just like the UI does. Before, it only supported Boolean variables. So what you would see sometimes, for instance, in the ship to code on the sales orders page, which has an editable property which is calculated and not just a simple Boolean, then when you were publishing your data, you would get an error message about the property editable and not being valid, etc., meaning that a number of pages couldn't be used for editing Excel. And remember, in general, you should use API pages instead of normal pages exposed through OData. But for editing Excel, we want that to mimic the UI behavior, which is why behind the scenes that uses OData on top of UI pages. So it's mainly for that functionality that this is relevant. Other web service calls have also received some stability improvements. We have made sure that the server now returns return code 503 if your request waits in the request queue and you end up timing out. And you will get a retry-after header back, and you can then decide to retry the call later. This has been backported and is available from 22.2.
And this is one of the examples. There will be many of these examples. You need to up your game on the clients, on the web service clients you write, the code you write, because we are now offering you and also expecting you to deal with return codes, to look for headers and make your clients much more stable. So together with the server is giving you that information and your clients reacting on it, your client code can simply be much more resilient to failures or transient things.
Yes. Now, another place where we've added more stability is when we have invalid metadata, which for instance can be that you have duplicates in the metadata, so you end up with two pages named the same, stuff that can happen when you have multiple extensions installed. And before, it would be very obvious, at least for the customer, that something was wrong because all web services would fail. And now the one that causes the failure is ignored and we emit partner telemetry. So you shouldn't rely on your customer calling you anymore. You should rely on telemetry instead. And I think that's a much better story. If you look in the telemetry app, you'll see that there is a new page where you can find the web service endpoints that fail at runtime, and it also hints at how you can actually fix them.
And if you really want to take it to the next level, you don't just have a Power BI app, but you actually alert reactively on these failures so that you know before the customer knows.
Yes.
And that would be even better.
That is, of course, the professional way of making use of telemetry.
Right. In Microsoft, we abbreviate everything. So we don't call it a troubleshooting guide. We call it a TSG because it's much faster to say TSG.
Yeah, we even have a three-letter acronym for three-letter acronym, which is TLA.
That is correct. Now, to make it easier for you to troubleshoot web services, we added a number of TSGs. This is the first one. This helps you to look at HTTP status codes, what they mean and what to do about them. So this first TSG is about, okay, if I get a 400, depending on whether it is incoming or outbound web services, how can I fix that? So go use docs much more, and that will actually help you hopefully troubleshoot web service calls. Specifically for this, we added a number of things in the Power BI apps. The first is, if you start putting user agent in your web service calls, that actually survives all the way in telemetry or into the server and emitted to telemetry. So the first box here on the right shows you which web service clients are having problems, right? So if you use a user agent, you can see it in the app and you can see, oh, it's this particular web service client that has the problem. We also add exceptions and AL call stacks, so you can also see that together with the user agent. The next thing is return status codes or return codes HTTP. So the apps, both for incoming and outgoing web service calls, now have better visuals on HTTP status and also better filters. So you can filter on a given status code, look up in the TSG about what is this, and then start improving that part of your code. Same goes for outgoing web services. You also get this new filtering and status code visuals. And then in the last release, we added, or actually some releases ago, we added a queue for incoming web service calls. Because if you are flooding the server with a lot of calls, we want to make sure that the server survives, and we just can handle things as we have available resources become available. This queuing time is now also showing up in telemetry, so you can see queue time statistics both in telemetry and in the Power BI reports. The most effective way to not have issues with web services is to write robust code. So apart from TSGs, we also added error handling best practices when you use HttpClient to call out to external services. And we made actually a huge makeover of the documentation for HttpClient. I'll just go through a few of these examples. First of all, an end-to-end article on how to use HttpClient, how to set up, run, and check for things. We also explain how HttpClient send calls can fail, so the different ways they can do that, as well as proper copy-to-clipboard code on error handling for the first part of setting up, as well as when you pass the results. When you pass the result from the service, you also need to check for status codes, and there's also code that you can just copy and make your code resilient. Especially for HTTP status, it could be some of these are just that external service saying, hey, wait a minute, you need to back up a bit. So you can also put in code here for retry strategies and then make your code more resilient in case the service you're calling is having some transient issues. And then we explain, as I mentioned, all the common HTTP error codes with also suggested solutions, whether you have inbound calls or outbound calls. We also made it possible when you call out, in case HttpClient send fails, even before passing return code, there are different ways it can do it. Maybe you didn't write the correct URL, or maybe you have a network error, or maybe you have a certificate error. So we made that easier for you to troubleshoot. If you use get last error text, you can now simply copy that into the error message. Next slide here. So that if customers are calling you with some problem, if they copy that in, you could actually get the error message and you can troubleshoot from there. Some examples here. Before, if you had SSL connection failures, the error message would, prior to version 23, would just be see inner exceptions, but you had no idea about what the inner exception was. So that's kind of, haha, see it, but we won't show you. Now we actually show, or at least give you a little bit more info. In this case, the remote certificate is invalid. Okay, that's much easier to troubleshoot if you actually know that. Another example here is also for a certificate, whereas before you would just get something, but in fact the problem that it was from the inner exception was padding was invalid and cannot be removed, and you need to fix your code. So it's just giving you some better options to find out what's wrong.
And a small thing behind the scenes is that we've optimized our usage of sockets, because before actually a large number of outgoing calls using the HTTP client could potentially star the VM for ports. So we're making more reuse, etc. And we've backported that, and that is the way we've been running even back to version 21.x. And it's not something that you really need to do any changes about. It's just for your information in case you've seen some of these issues. There are also a few upcoming changes. The schema version for custom APIs will change its default, and we are removing the support for delta links. It's already not really supported. There are very, very few users of this functionality, and we will be removing that.
So, go-dos. Go check if you have metadata issues, use telemetry to find it, and fix it.
Yeah, and also make sure that you harden your code for interacting with web services, both the incoming requests where you should handle the response codes correctly, decide on a back-off strategy, etc., and look at the troubleshooting guide and harden it. And same thing for the outgoing calls. You can hand the errors in AL code, and you can provide relevant details as detailed information. And of course also there, consider retrying.
And then stop using delta links. The feature is deprecated, as Jens showed in the last slide. It's going to be removed in 2024, wave 1. So you have 6 months to stop using it, and then we'll remove it from the service. Other sessions that could be relevant if you like this is the compiler and developer tools session, what's new in developer tools, and a new kid on the block.
Yeah, the what's new in Dataverse and Dynamics 365 app integration. Part 2 will cover business events, which is also tightly related to web services. And then my good friend Kenny.
Yeah,
as
we also always have the what's new in telemetry session. Bits and bytes, small nuggets of things you can use to make your life easier using telemetry.
Yeah, and of course we refer to the normal resources, Yammer, X, BCO, BC Ideas, and join office hours if you can. And with that, thank you very much for watching.
Thanks for having us.